Okay, can you hear me? What an incredibly rich conversation we've started this morning, and with such a diversity of voices. We've even heard the city sing and speak, and now we're going to bring science in. And so it's my great honor to open this science-led session, and it happens to be led by brilliant women scientists who have traveled from around the world to be here. So let's give them a round of applause, please. This is my first time in Seoul, and it's very emotional, not just because the star of Squid Game is here, but because in a real sense, I owe my very existence to the generosity of this city. Let's see, is this working? My father, as a young man, escaped Pyongyang to come to Seoul, a city which gave him sanctuary and an education and safe passage to the United States, where he went on to study science at MIT and realized his true Korean identity as a massive overachiever. And speaking of overachievement, Seoul's own reinvention from the destruction of war to a global powerhouse is truly remarkable. But we're here because, like many global cities, Seoul faces a new set of challenges. I think about the phrase from the philosopher Byung-Chul Han, the burnout society. And Seoul also has an historic opportunity to lead a new urban agenda, to design not only for growth, but with an architectural generosity that truly supports the human needs of its citizens. We're in a historic inflection point where more of our world is migrating to cities than any other time in history. And therefore, understanding the health impacts of the built environment is a public concern. It's a critical, urgent, collective concern for us all, not just architects and designers. And science is confirming what we know intuitively to be true, that these walls of public life that we all share aren't just a backdrop. They're an active force shaping how we feel, function, and connect, or feel disconnected, in fact. And so today, we at Humanize are launching a new report. It's the first to comprehensively address this crucial problem, and it captures over 80 new studies across neuroscience, neuroaesthetics, environmental psychology, place-based theories, and urban design to build a kind of framework of evidence on the measurable impact of facades and streetscapes on our mind and body and behavior. But it's not just for academics, and that's why we've created this evidence review in its summary form for you. It's for everyone, from community leaders to city leaders to investors, developers, and designers, everyone who cares about designing for public health. So, in order to understand the science, first we are going to play a little mind game. It's not a Squid Game, so relax. This is not the image of urban life that we want to promote. But we have to engage in a shift in our mindsets. And I know that today's session is about thinking, but the first shift is really about the priority of feeling. You see, we think we are thinking beings who feel, but actually, no. We're feeling beings who think. That is to say, sensation comes first, often before conscious awareness. And what neuroscience is able to show us with mobile sensors and neuroimaging is that primary response to buildings in real time. Second shift, we are old brains in new environments. Our senses evolved over millennia in the rich context of nature. By contrast, our time in a built environment, in artificial environments, is but a tiny fraction. And again, what eye tracking and other experiments reveal to us is this deep evolutionary need for a certain kind of visual complexity and sensory richness in the built environment, which is so lacking in our modern buildings. And finally, the third mind shift. What surrounds us shapes us. The facades and streetscapes of our daily encounter are not neutral surfaces. We need to think of them as active interfaces affecting everything from stress levels to social and emotional effects. Now, this has all been brought together in this large evidence review. You have a summary here, and what I'd like to do in the next 10 minutes or so is take you through 8 core findings which show how the evidence builds from these basic physiological levels to these larger social effects. So the first one, remember the first mind shift. We are feeling beings first. And curvature, openness, and proportion in facade design can create calm, whereas monotony and harsh repetitive design can elevate your heart rate, trigger stress, and cause visual fatigue. And this is the subject of a brilliant research paper, which you'll hear next, from 2 neuroscientists leading the field. Second, remember our evolutionary brain. We are wired for symmetry, rhythm, and variation. Visually complex facades don't just look better, they are more engaging and easier to process. So they reduce a kind of cognitive load as we move through the environment. And what we know about the restorative effects of biophilic design applies to facades as well. And this is an extraordinary example of the use of nature-based design, but even small traces of nature, leaf-like patterns and curved forms and organic textures can reduce stress and lift the mood, and this is especially important in cities. Now, moving on to behavioral impacts of facades. Distinctive facades aid our spatial awareness and feelings of orientation. They act as visual anchors, helping us find our way. And this is especially important in urban or unfamiliar environments. And how a building meets the street also shapes behavior. Human-scale details and signs of life at eye level make streets feel safe, and they encourage social connection. And as buildings grow taller and cities denser, this design at eye level becomes all the more significant. When facades reflect craft, culture, and care, they build feelings of comfort, pride, and belonging. Characterful architecture strengthens bonds and helps people feel at home. And this is an area where Professor Magin brings real expertise, and she's going to lead us in an exercise at the end of this session. And finally, remember, what surrounds us shapes us. We don't just see buildings, we sense them. Light, texture, and rhythm spark memory and emotion and feelings of awe. And this is a topic that Dr. Upali Nanda will touch upon next. And, you know, as we're moving sort of up the chain, so to speak, of this research and evidence, trying to bring it from sort of the hard science of neuroscience to the softer sciences of neurophenomenology, what we're doing is we're thinking about lived experience and embodied experience. And this is difficult to capture, but what we wanted to do in the evidence review was really to bring as many disciplines into conversation as possible so that siloed fields of study could begin to work together. And so if you bring all of this together, there's a really interesting body of research that's emerging about what's called salutogenic design from Salus Health. In other words, design that supports our health and well-being. And so buildings that invite curiosity and connection through texture, detail, and form reduce anxiety and lift mood. And some call this architectural generosity, design that fully engages the senses and creates space for dignity and delight. Putting this all together, we have a picture now of what an enriched, nourishing environment might look like. Visually rich, distinctive, and emotional. Those are the three characteristics that we can bring it down to. And I've intentionally featured Korean projects for each of these core findings to emphasize that it's already happening here. As Thomas Heatherwick said, you are already doing this. You only need to invest in it more. So to conclude, how might science and this evidence shape a new urban agenda? In the past, in urban agendas of the past, we've tried to build smart cities and sustainable ones. But are our cities really smart or sustainable if they don't meet our human needs for joy, belonging, and connection? Perhaps a wise city will embed emotional intelligence in design and an ethics of care in how we build, now and for future generations, to support both human and environmental sustainability. And this is the topic for tomorrow. We're standing at a new frontier where emerging science and design can help create more radically human buildings. But we can't do it alone. It's only possible in collaboration and in conversations like this one as part of a global movement. So, I invite you to join us, read and share this report. Please get in touch and carry this conversation forward. And now it's my great pleasure to invite Dr. Upali Nanda to the stage. Welcome, welcome Upali.
Can we give another round of applause for Anna, please? Everything she said is so elegantly simple. Then why is it so hard to do? If what we are hearing resonates, why is it so hard to do? I'm representing practice today. I'm a researcher in practice. I've been in practice for 2 decades. I've had a strange bridge professional role. I'm a pracademic. I moonlight in academia. I teach, I research, I practice. I speak to developers. I have to talk profit and bottom line every day. And for 2 decades, my work has been in the intersection of human perception and design. Because in the end, two things always will hold true. Your body hosts your brain, and this body lives in an environment. So if the container of the brain is the body, the container of the body is the environment. Those are two absolute truths. And yet, we spend so little time. Think about how much time you spend thinking about what goes into your body. Diet, exercise, skincare. So much time thinking about what goes into my body and on my body. So little time thinking about what my body goes into. I'll say that again. So much time thinking about what goes into me, and so little time thinking about what I go into. Why? How did we get here? It's a changing world. Our world is changing so quickly. It's a strangely disconnected world. We are hyper-connected, and yet we feel so alone. The lonely century that Thomas talked about earlier. We used to think about footprints, now we have to think about cloud prints, and no, I don't mean data centers. We used to think about building for sensors, now we have sensing buildings. We used to talk about being human-centered, and then we realized being completely human-centered hasn't gotten us so far, and we have to be living-centered. This balance between humans, nature, and technology, we have to rediscover it. We suddenly got so much data. We started talking prediction. But then we thought about, what's the real proof? What's it making me feel like? In the world of design, we finally asked the question, what's the outcome? For who? And that is what building brains is all about. What do we build, and how does it affect this center of our interaction with our world? Because everything we think, feel, sense is what the environment gives us and what we perceive back. Our brains, the research shows, needs healthy, neuroaesthetically appealing environments. It doesn't want it, it needs it. It craves it. In the research you're about to see from Mumi and Cleo, you will see the proof at a neurological level. Something as simple as the complexity of the facade can light up regions of my brain in provable ways. It can make a difference in a precise way that I can measure and tell you. But the real question for many of us here is, fantastic, is that an academic endeavor? Can we do this in practice? Is it possible to do this in practice? What does it do to my bottom line? You can. It's not easy. But it will be easy if the movement that has just taken off becomes mainstream. Here's a tiny little example. We did a neighborhood in UC San Diego. And instead of calling it a live-learn neighborhood, we called it a live-learn lab. And it had a very simple premise. What if the places we live in become our laboratories? What happens then if I don't pretend that the building, my project is over when the doors open, but rather I say my project begins when the doors open? In this project, the client said that I want you to do it in design, bid, build. A design build project means strict schedule, strict budget, cannot be changed. But I'll give you an extra year to measure outcomes from it. And the client said that, right? Because it was a university, and they said, could we learn from what we create? And so we measured impact, and things like energy use was pretty easy to measure, and we exceeded those impacts. But what was fascinating fascinating is, for the first time, the client said, can you measure human experience? Can you talk to the students? Can we find out? And so the entire research was done for a year with students on the campus measuring their lived experience off the campus. Not too complicated, and yet the findings were fascinating. What we found was not only was there an increase with student satisfaction, but there was an 8.2% reduction in student-reported depression. New campus, on budget, on time, and an 8.2% reduction in student-reported depression. And students would say that just walking around the campus promotes well-being. What was different about the facade of the outside of the buildings? The scale. They had moved from two-story apartments into this large, multi-story campus, and the entire thing was designed in sections, so the facade was broken up. Happened because we started with human experience, and because we knew we had to measure human experience. And that project was not more expensive, it was more intentional. Because emotions matter. And when we design for emotions, business follows. Because we make emotional decisions 5 times faster than we make rational decisions. And good design inspires emotions. Good design makes you feel something that then you rationalize with a lot of business decisions. And every designer in the room knows it. And yet, we don't give enough time to it. We're going to talk about the emotion of awe, because honestly, I have become fascinated by the topic. That's the reason. Let's talk about the anatomy of something like awe. Feelings of awe create little earthquakes in the mind. It's why we go on vacations. Somehow we've decided that awe is not available to me in my daily life, and I have to go somewhere to find it. But here is what awe does. Just experiencing awe activates parts of your brain which are related to executive function, emotional regulation, pleasure, reward, and my favorite, when you experience awe, you reduce your your focus on yourself. When we experience awe, we stop being obsessed with ourselves. What does that do? Scientists will argue that awe plays an important role in happiness, health, and social interactions. And in fact, it may have played a role in how humans got along, because they experienced awe together, and they felt small together, and they realized that to be something bigger, we have to do it together. What if I said that you really, if you want to solve for loneliness and mental health issues and all of this disconnection we are feeling, get more awe. What you experienced yesterday in the opening ceremony, that was awe. And that feeling of connection for everyone who shared that moment will pay off dividends for years and years and years together. And awe has a formula. Scientists say that awe is an emotion when 2 criteria are met. 1, it has to feel vast, not be vast. It has to feel vast. And second, it has to surprise you. It has to update your mental schema, just a little bit of surprise, something unexpected. It's vastness and surprise. And if you take it as a design challenge, it's not impossible to achieve. And yet, why do we give so little attention to designing for emotions like awe? Why do we measure function but take emotion for granted? I would argue, and please to my designer friends in the room, tell me if I'm getting this wrong. The first is our obsession with representation. We love our drawings, we love our renderings, we love how the artifact looks. And so, our incentive to measure human experience becomes lower. We have very little measure of, like, what's my incentive? I gave you the drawings, you will go and build the building. Why am I measuring? Only when you have a plan that says, hey, I'm not going to give you all of the fee until you tell me a year later how somebody living there felt. That's incentive. The third challenge is disciplinary arrogance. And I think Thomas talked about this a little bit. We love our little silos. We love talking to each other. We feel so good. We talk to each other. Nobody else understands us. But that's hard because when that happens, public awareness goes down. And to me, this movement is so powerful because it's about public awareness. Everything changes when the public is aware and demands it. How many times have I been the only architect in the room who's saying, why are you talking about heart health, but you don't have an architect in the room? Why are we talking about public health and there isn't a designer in the room? Everyone is spending their lives in some place, but the designers of that place are not in the critical conversations. Why? Because the public hasn't made this statement saying where I live matters, where I work matters, and I want someone to change that. Because once you've built something, it takes 40 years even for the most ugliest wrong building to be taken down. You are stuck with your mistakes. So please, for the public to stand up and say, we demand more, is vital. Immersing ourselves in the experience of what it means to feel a place, to spend time thinking about, is vital. I would argue that every design decision is only a hypothesis. We're only thinking that this is what's going to happen. Lived experience is the outcome. And if it is, then how do we get there? How do we get to the outcomes that change cities, that change societies? First, I think we make practice a creative lab, which is anchored on this art and science of being human. Not human-centered, but being human. What if every project is a lab for being human? What if we constantly ask this question, why? Why am I feeling a certain way? For those of you who are right now in this moment feeling that boredom, why? Is it me? Is it what I'm saying? Is it the fact that you just had your lunch? Is it the fact that the room is dark? Is it the fact that you know that I have the power because I have the light and you are sitting out there in the dark? Anytime you feel something, ask why. And then ask, what is the role of the environment in it? That's the project we're starting right now. Asking this question about why do some places inspire awe? Why do they make us feel connected? Why do they shape us? And why can't we explain it? And this is a crowdsourced project. We're building an entire image bank for this. So if you take a picture of this QR code, which will come up, please take a picture of the code, share an image of why places matter, and please give it to your daughter, your brother, your friend, someone who is not in the design industry, to get an image bank of why places matter. Let's do it together. We have a coalition that's building with the Humanize movement to get policymakers, developers, and everyone who does not believe in the movement and very much focused on practice to say this is not going to affect your bottom line other than making it better, because design matters. And guess what? When you don't design for emotion in the first round of design, the repercussion is long. I'm very honored to be here in this movement to radically humanize. It's long, long overdue. So thank you.
함께 감사드립니다. 이어서 제가 좀 앉아서 질의응답을 진행해 보겠습니다. You went too far? Yeah, you'll give you a mic.
I have a mic here. All right, maybe I need the translation device.
I'll be asking you in English, Anna.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. All right.
So I have a couple of questions prepared. What do you feel needs to change in the practice of architecture to achieve more humanistic design?
I think if we did everything we talked about today, it changes, but maybe three things. Clients ask for outcomes in terms of lived experience. Public asks for experience in terms of lived outcomes. And finally, for designers to stop talking to only other designers and talk to the public and every other constituent in this.
Right. And I think the second question follows the first one. Why does your firm HKS invest in research?
Because I make them. No, it started from healthcare actually. The investment in research started from healthcare because evidence-based design came up and healthcare institutions were liable for their health outcomes in their buildings. So healthcare institutions started asking, can you show me that what you're telling me to do has a health impact? And it started from there. It has really diversified a lot, but it has changed because for some typologies we were asking for outcomes and we did not have a way of measuring. I will say that even though we have invested in many firms, like Heatherwick does, many firms now invest in research, what we really need to make the switch is to change the way we do investment and what we ask from our designs for that research to be truly useful.
Well, as we know, most evidence-based design has come from the study of the interiors of buildings because it's much easier to measure. I mean, it's a contained lab-like space, right? And what we're trying to do is far more difficult, right? To measure the impact of the outsides of buildings by people passing by. It's not a constrained group, right? But what's really exciting right now is this advance and convergence of neuroscience and design with the mobile technologies that can allow these real-time measurements and also imaging studies, which we're going to see next. And so, I think that we're as I said, we're kind of on a frontier of a new possibility to finally get a handle, at least a beginning, of an answer to this question. So I think it's a moment that we really have to capitalize on. Yeah.
One little caveat I would also add to that is we realize that sometimes it's very hard to unpack the impact of design when you're responding to a brief, a design brief that doesn't ask for more, right? That's a big problem. So part of investing in research is to go upstream in the conversation and to educate policymakers, C-suite members, city leadership, to say ask more, because if you ask more of design upstream, then design will do more. And sometimes we're asking very little.
You talked about who the designers should speak to. So not just among designers, but the public and also someone up higher. At your personal level, how do you make a business out of your research?
I will say I found it very surprising that in this world you pay a lot more money to people who tell you what to do and a lot less to people who do it. It's strange, but we have actually found that being on the upstream level of design advisory to be able to say, this is how you want to set up your portfolios, this is what you want to prioritize, setting up strategy for design before you do the building for design can actually be compensated for. So 20 years ago or 10 years ago, I would have said there is no monetary value, but that is because as architects, we are not taught how to value things. We undervalue our creative potential more than any other industry I know. So I do believe that there is a lot of value, not just in integrating it into design, but doing more upstream work that tells you about how to frame design. And we have been successful. It's still starting, but I think we're going to see a lot more of it. Especially in a world, and I'll go back to something Thomas said, in this day and time with AI, with the digital revolution, with this strange world we have, the digital-physical convergence and the relevance of the physical environment has never been more critical. So your spatial intelligence, the ability to physically realize something, is a superpower. And we really should lean into this time.
And I think it's also a time of growing awareness in mainstream culture on the ways that our mental health is being affected by the digital environments, but also our urban environments. So I think, you know, it's also something that taps into a larger consciousness now of how important our nervous system is. You know, almost everyone knows now that we're overstimulated, we're stressed, and so it's perfect time for architecture and design to talk about this shared environment that we live in.
I'd like to add one other question, which I haven't informed the interpreters, but I'm sure they will do a wonderful job. I would like you both to answer the last question. I was wondering what is the major driving force behind this passion for the field of research that you have now embarked on, or you have been working on?
Interesting. Well, my father was a scientist, but I'm not a scientist by training. I'm trained in philosophy and intellectual history and history of art and architecture. But for a long time, I've worked on the importance of the aesthetics of the city to human thriving. And so when Humanize launched their campaign and Thomas wrote his book, it was something that resonated deeply for work that I had done for over 15 years on what constitutes a thriving city, one that really nourishes and supports human capabilities to the fullest level, and to you know, go beyond that impasse around beauty, because beauty is such a contested word, especially in architecture. But to understand how deeply aesthetic we are, right? And to understand that at a biological basis, a neurological basis, that we are really wired for a certain kind of aesthetic in our environment. And so, in some ways, it's just brought around a very long question for me that I've had since I was a philosopher, then working on cities and in culture and in art. What this campaign is capturing is really that, our need for deeply enriching, aesthetic, nourishing environments. Wonderful.
I'm just trying to unlock the potential of the built environment. I feel like I'm living in this frustration constantly of, it can do more if you let it. It can do so much more if you let it, and it feels that because we have closed off our language, and most people don't know how to engage with that language, we are working at this much of our potential right now. And when you unlock human perception, when you see things from the lens of human perception, it's so much easier because everybody understands that language. And I think that's what it is for me.
Thank you both. Thank you so much.
And thank you.